SABC News spoke to the Minister of Communications, Stella Ndabeni-Abrahams, about the latest developments at the public broadcaster. Okay, we're going to proceed now. We're now going to speak to the Chairperson of the SABC board, Mr. Bongumusa Makhathini. Thank you so much, sir, for joining us around the developments here at the SABC. Now, we understand that the board had an emergency meeting with the Minister yesterday. Are you able to take us into your confidence as to what the general thrust of that exchange was?
Thank you for giving me an opportunity. And I just want to start by stating that as the chair of the board, it is my duty and responsibility to communicate the decisions and the resolutions of the board. And that's why I appreciate the opportunity for me to be given to clarify a few issues. Indeed, there was a meeting that was requested by the minister yesterday. And in that meeting, the minister wanted an update and a briefing on Section 189. And in that meeting, the minister made it very clear that she would prefer that the board explore other alternatives. But in that meeting, there was no decision that was taken. So as it stands of today, the board resolutions that were taken, which mandated management to implement Section 189, still stands.
Right.
So there is a board resolution that was taken on the 4th of June, which mandated management to start the process of consultation, to implement the target operating model, and to embark on a restructuring. And to consult. That meeting happened on the 4th. Then on the 30th of October, we took another board resolution mandating management now to implement the retrenchment as per the report that was presented on the 30th of October.
So if I can just come in there, Chair, and just ask you around the actual process today. We understand that the 18th November was supposed to be the last day that you issue letters, letters of retrenchment. Has that taken place? And if that is the case, what happens next?
So the management, because the whole issue of issuing of letters, it's at an operational level. So management has issued the letters of retrenchment as mandated by the board, as I indicated, that what management is doing is actually a board decision. And I do want to clarify something that, in South Africa, when it comes to boards, there are no minority and there are no majorities. When a board resolution has been validly adopted and taken, mandating management to implement a particular resolution, that becomes a board resolution. And our board charter is very clear also on this, that even if you may have voted against a particular decision, but every board member is expected to respect, one, the confidentiality and the sensitivity of board discussions, and is also expected to remain loyal to the board decisions that they voted against or even those that voted in favor. So it is also a bad practice, according to our board charter, and a bad etiquette to attempt to reach a consensus outside of a board meeting, which is what, unfortunately, and it is really highly unfortunate that our deputy chair has taken it upon herself to break from the collective and start diverging even how other board members voted. That's unprocedural, and that is not in line with our board charter.
Well, no doubt you'll take that up with her. But now just tell us about the meeting that you're scheduled to have with SCOPA later today. We understand that's going to be a closed-door meeting, and yet, of course, you represent the public broadcaster. Why is that the case?
The meeting that we're having with the portfolio committee this evening is a continuation of a meeting we had with them, where we were discussing what we regard as commercially sensitive issues, which wouldn't necessarily want it to be discussed in an open session, because it talks about our strategies, our commercial strategies, it talks about our plans, which actually it would not be good for our competitors to get access to that kind of information. So that was the meeting that was set long time ago, as I said, and it's closed because we requested that meeting to be a closed meeting because of the content that would be discussed.
All right. So let's come back to the new structure, the new structure that's going to be instituted once this process is done with. There's concern that because you're going to be cutting quite a number of jobs, this may actually affect the quality of content and even undermine the mandate of the public broadcaster. What's your response to that?
My response is the process we've embarked on, we had thorough deliberations, and these kind of initiatives are driven by management. What do I mean by this? These are people who are running those divisions. They have a sense where there are gaps. They have a sense where what is required for their divisions to be able to operate in a functional manner and in a proper manner. So, and it is correct that there may be areas where there are vacancies. And I think this has been communicated by Ian, our COO, that people affected will be allowed to apply for those vacancies because there are areas where we need to fill vacancies. But the truth of the matter is, it is not correct to create an impression that as a board, we do not understand what is important in terms of our fulfilling our public mandate. And everything that we've done actually as this board is to defend the independence and the impartiality of the SABC and to make sure that our journalists, our presenters, and everybody that works for SABC is able to do their work without any fear or without any trouble of any form. So we're very clear about what's required, and we'll do everything possible to make sure that we have a structure that works and that is fit for purpose.
I'm sure that when boards and managements decide to take these decisions, very difficult decisions indeed, there's an element of sensitivity that one would want to pursue. I know, for example, of a couple of colleagues who happen to be married and they work at the institution, but they're both being retrenched. Aren't those sorts of scenarios something that management or the board would contemplate ahead of making such decisions, perhaps saying, let's rather retrench one rather than both? Because, of course, that has very significant consequences.
That kind of input is what we sought through the consultation process that happened over 120 days. Because you will know that the Labour Relations Act guides in terms of how you deal with such a process. So there is a 60-day period where you need to be engaging with unions and employees. In that engagement, you're finding ideas around how best to minimize the impact, but also you agree on the criteria that needs to be adopted in implementing Section 189. And from where we're sitting as a board, we mandated management to have those discussions, and I believe they continue to engage, and they even now with the news people, there was an engagement yesterday, and I understand that they will continue to engage on those in that regard.
Now, we know that you did deliver the latest annual financials to us yesterday, showing us that the SABC experienced a net loss of 511 million rand. And of course, that's clearly not sustainable. And obviously, you know, you need to cut costs on the one hand, and you've decided to go down the retrenchment route on the one hand, but you also have a responsibility to boost revenue as well. Do you think, given the size of the SABC and the number of platforms that it has, do you think that you've sufficiently leveraged those platforms in terms of advertising such that we can get more revenue coming into SABC?
Let me start by indicating the fact that we have a turnaround plan, which is a 3-year journey. And we only started getting funding to assist with the implementation of that turnaround late last year, and the last tranche came in March this year. So the truth of the matter is that turnaround guides what needs to be done. When it comes to cost, there are two main drivers of our cost. The first one is the compensation cost, which sits at about 43% of our total expenditure. And when you do a benchmark, it is clearly unsustainable. The second one, of course, talks to digital signal distribution, which sits close to about 12-13% of our total expenditure. You cannot ignore the cost line, more especially when we're operating in an environment where revenues are down, and as a result of that, we've got to contain our cost. But of course, we are doing quite a lot. I mean, last week or so, management signed a deal with Telkom, which is a new revenue stream that we've never had. So there is enough attention and there's enough effort being put in getting new revenue streams. And if you look at how the team is performing, there are signs that we are turning around also from the revenue side.
Now, sir, of course, we know that the incomes of the board and the general executive are well publicised. And one of the questions that staff are asking is, why is it that we may have to face some salary sacrifice, but that doesn't seem to be the plan at a board and executive level?
Basically, what we approve as a board, it's a salary freeze for everybody. For everybody. This is including our general staff, executive team, and the board. Just to make this clear, the board of SABC has not had a board fees increase for the last, I'll say, for the last 5 years or so. And we won't be getting any increase for the next 2 years or so. That decision was taken at the AGM that we had. So it is not correct that there are areas that we have not touched. There are no holy cows here. Management, board, and staff, they all have to sacrifice and contribute whatever they can to make SABC sustainable.
Yeah. And one last question, Mr. Makhathini. Will there be consequences for the head of news because she didn't go ahead and implement the instruction to hand out redundancy letters?
What happened yesterday with our news team and the meeting that they had was unfortunate, and we really want to apologize to South Africans and implore our employees to make sure that we always adhere and uphold our editorial policies, even if issues pertain to them or pertain to internal matters. We cannot have a situation where we don't do what is expected of us from an editorial point of view just because that particular issue is internal. So what happened yesterday is unfortunate, but it is still within the domain of the executive team, and I'm sure management team is engaging and they will take an appropriate decision after they've had engagements.
All right, Mr. Makhathini, thank you so much for your time and coming on point to speak to us. That was Bongumusa Makhathini. He is the SABC board chairman.